He thought he accepted to marry only one Apache girl, unaware he had accepted 3 Apache sisters. John had always imagined a quiet, simple life. The noise and chaos of the eastern cities, the constant bustle and the endless crowds had worn him down over the years. When he finally decided to leave, he wanted something different, something peaceful, something honest. He had heard stories of the western frontier, of vast lands untouched by towns and industry, where nature ruled and life moved at its own rhythm. It was there he hoped to find freedom, work, and maybe, if fortune smiled upon him, a chance at love. He traveled for days on horseback, carrying little more than a small pack with a few personal belongings and some supplies. The sun rose and fell in the open sky, casting shades of gold and red across the desert plains. He had seen few people along the way, only the occasional wanderer or trader passing by. And yet, despite the solitude, he felt a strange peace. Each evening he would set up a small camp, light a fire, and listen to the soft whisper of the wind moving through the grass. He told himself that life here would be simple, predictable even, and that perhaps he could finally leave behind the sorrow that had followed him since childhood. Eventually, his journey brought him to a small Apache village nestled between low hills and a winding river. The village looked alive and warm, yet it held a quiet order. Huts made of mud and wood were arranged carefully, and smoke curled up from small cooking fires. People moved about in a rhythm that seemed natural, as if the land and its inhabitants were in constant conversation. Children played near the river, laughing as they splashed the water with sticks and bare hands. Older men and women worked together in the fields, tending to crops and preparing food. The moment John stepped into the village, he felt an unfamiliar sense of curiosity and admiration. It was then that he first met Lila. She was unlike anyone he had ever met before. Her dark hair was neatly braided, and her eyes held a quiet strength that immediately caught his attention. She smiled gently when she saw him, her face calm but kind. Lila approached him as though she had known him all her life, and John was taken aback by her warmth. She welcomed him with words he only partially understood at first, but her gestures, her laughter, and the sparkle in her eyes made everything clear. She was happy to see him, and he felt an unexpected comfort in her presence. The village elders were quick to notice John as well. They spoke in a calm, measured tone, explaining in their language the customs of the village. Through Lila's careful translation, John learned that he had been formally recognized by the village. He assumed this meant he would be staying with Lila and that she was his intended partner. He had no idea the situation was far more complex. He nodded politely, trying to show respect, unaware that this simple act of agreement would soon lead to confusion. In the days that followed, John spent time learning about village life. He helped with small tasks, such as fetching water from the river, assisting in planting crops and repairing fences. At first, he felt clumsy and unsure of himself, but Lila patiently guided him. She showed him how to carry a basket of vegetables without spilling, how to move quietly when animals were nearby, and even how to recognize which herbs could be used for medicine. John found himself learning quickly, fascinated by the knowledge that had been passed down through generations. He admired the way the villagers lived in harmony with the land, never taking more than they needed, and always showing care for one another. Evenings were the most enchanting. The village would gather around the central fire, sharing stories, singing, and dancing. John listened intently, captivated by the tales of bravery, wisdom, and history. The rhythm of the drums and the voices of the singers created a sense of belonging that he had never felt before. Lila often sat beside him, explaining the meanings behind the songs and stories, and John felt a growing connection not only to her but also to the community as a whole. Each day, he felt more comfortable, more at home. John's heart, however, carried a small worry he could not yet voice. He had come seeking peace, but he had also hoped for a simpler life, perhaps a life shared with one person. He thought he had found that in Lila. She was gentle, strong, and wise beyond her years. She laughed easily, yet she carried herself with dignity. He admired her skill in everyday life, the way she could weave baskets, prepare food, and calm the children with just a few words. He found himself imagining a future with her, a simple life of partnership and shared work, a home filled with laughter and respect. But as he spent more time in the village, John began to notice small hints of something he did not fully understand. Occasionally, Lila would speak with her sisters, Ayana and Nijoni, in quiet tones. They would laugh softly and then glance in his direction, their eyes bright and knowing. At first, he thought nothing of it. He assumed they were simply sisters, close as any family, and he didn't pay much attention to the subtle glances or whispered words. He was too focused on his own thoughts, too caught up in the excitement of this new life. One afternoon, as John helped Lila gather herbs by the river, she explained more about the customs of their people. She spoke of the importance of family, of bonds that extended beyond blood, and of traditions that had guided the village for generations. John listened intently, nodding and asking questions, feeling both respect and confusion. He had never lived in a place where community, tradition, and family obligations were so deeply intertwined. Everything was different from what he had known, yet he felt a strange sense of comfort in the order and meaning behind it. The next morning, as he awoke to the sound of children playing, John felt a mix of excitement and unease. He didn't yet know that the full truth of the situation was about to reveal itself. Lila's sisters would soon enter his life in a way he could never have anticipated. But at that moment, he still believed he was here for Lila alone. He smiled to himself as he walked through the village, thinking of the days ahead, unaware that his understanding of love, commitment, and family would soon be challenged in ways he could never have imagined. As John continued to integrate into the daily life of the village, he found himself reflecting often on how different life here was from the world he had left behind. He appreciated the simplicity of routines, the clear roles and responsibilities, and the respect everyone showed to each other. Even in moments of fatigue or frustration, he felt a sense of fulfillment he had never experienced in the cities. Every evening, as the firelight danced across the faces of the villagers, he felt a warmth that went beyond physical comfort, a warmth born of belonging, understanding, and shared purpose. Yet, despite all this, a small part of him remained cautious. He did not yet fully comprehend the depth of the village's traditions, and he assumed his future with Lila would be straightforward. He could not foresee the surprises that awaited him, the twists of fate that would soon reshape his understanding of love and commitment. For now, he simply embraced the kindness extended to him, the gentle guidance of Lila, and the quiet, steady rhythm of life in the Apache village. By the end of the first week, John had begun to feel less like a visitor and more like a member of the community. He laughed with the children, helped the elders, and shared stories with the villagers. He learned the names of every hut, every animal, and every plant. And through it all, Lila remained by his side, patient, encouraging, and kind. He felt a bond forming, a sense that perhaps this was the life he had been searching for. Little did John know, the story he believed he was living was only the beginning. The lessons of understanding, acceptance, and unexpected surprises were just about to unfold. And when they did, his world, his ideas of love, family, and commitment would be challenged in ways he could never have imagined. John had grown more comfortable in the village over the past few weeks. Every day, he woke to the gentle sounds of children laughing and birds singing, and every night, he listened to the crackling fire while the villagers told stories of their ancestors. He thought he understood the rhythm of life here, and he believed that his future with Lila was simple and certain. But life in the village, like the river that ran through it, had hidden depths. One morning, John noticed something unusual. As he walked toward the river to help Lila gather water, he saw two young women standing at the edge of the village, watching him and Lila with quiet interest. Their expressions were calm, yet their eyes sparkled with mischief and curiosity. John assumed they were friends or distant relatives of Lila, though he didn't recognize them immediately. When Lila greeted them, John was introduced to their names, Yana and Nijoni. At first, John thought of them as Lila's close friends or extended family, and he smiled politely, trying to make conversation despite his limited understanding of their language. They returned his smile, and for a moment, everything seemed simple. But John would soon realize that there was far more at play than he could have imagined. Over the next few days, John observed the sisters more closely. Yana had a lively spirit. She was bold and adventurous, often running through the fields or climbing trees with the children. She laughed easily and spoke freely, her energy infectious. Nijoni, in contrast, was gentle and calm, her movements quiet and deliberate. She spent hours tending to the small garden behind her hut, carefully watering each plant and humming soft melodies. Lila remained the bridge between John and her sisters, translating their words and guiding him through the complex social customs of the village. One evening, after helping to prepare a meal for the villagers, John sat by the fire with Lila. He finally asked about her sisters in a quiet, cautious voice. "They are close to you?" he inquired, trying to understand their place in the family. Lila smiled softly, then explained something John did not expect. "In our village," she said slowly, "family and bonds of friendship and respect are very important. Sometimes these bonds extend in ways outsiders do not fully understand. You must know that you are not only connected to me, but also to Ayana and Nijoni in ways that are meaningful." John listened carefully, nodding, but inside, a sense of confusion began to stir. He thought he had agreed to be with Lila, but now he realized that the customs of the village were different from anything he had ever known. Lila noticed his hesitation and gently squeezed his hand, reassuring him. "Do not worry, you will understand in time," she said. The next morning, John found himself helping the sisters gather herbs from the hills. Yana laughed as she darted across the rocks, picking plants with ease. Nijoni moved quietly, her eyes scanning the ground for the smallest herbs. John tried to keep up, clumsily stepping over roots and stones, and both sisters laughed softly at his awkwardness. At first, the laughter embarrassed him, but soon he found himself smiling along, realizing that they were not mocking him, only enjoying the shared experience. As the days passed, John began to notice small gestures that hinted at the sisters' feelings toward him. Yana would hand him herbs without speaking, her eyes lingering on his face for a moment longer than necessary. Nijoni often stayed close, quietly observing him and occasionally offering gentle guidance. John did not know how to interpret these actions. In his world, relationships were usually straightforward, one person, one partner. But here, the bonds seemed to be layered and intertwined, a complex web of family, respect, and emotion. One afternoon, John decided to speak to Lila alone. They walked to the riverbank, where the water shimmered in the afternoon sun. John took a deep breath, trying to choose his words carefully. "Lila," he began, I do not understand everything. I thought you were my bride, but I feel that your sisters, that they are also connected to this. Can you explain?" Lila listened quietly, then nodded. "Yes," she said softly. "This is part of our tradition. When a person joins our family, the connection is not only to one of us, but to the family as a whole. It is about trust, respect, and shared life. You did not choose this, but it is now your path." John felt a mix of surprise, worry, and awe. He had expected life with Lila to be simple, but now he realized that simplicity was an illusion. The connection to the sisters was real, and he could not ignore it. He wanted to refuse to simplify things in his own way, but he knew that doing so would cause harm. He could see the strength of the bonds between the sisters, their unity, and their loyalty to one another. To disrupt that would be unkind and disrespectful. In the following days, John observed more closely how the sisters interacted with one another and with him. They had a rhythm, a way of communicating without words, and a deep understanding that John admired. He saw how they cared for each other, how they worked together, and how they shared both joy and responsibility. The more he observed, the more he realized that love in this village was not about possession or control. It was about connection, trust, and respect. One evening, the village gathered for a celebration. Drums beat steadily, and villagers sang songs passed down through generations. John stood near the fire, watching the sisters dance. Lila's movements were graceful and assured, Ayana's energetic and lively, and Nijoni's calm and flowing. Each sister had a different energy, but together they created a harmony that was mesmerizing. John could feel the strength of their bond, and he understood that he was now a part of it. After the celebration, the sisters joined John by the river. They spoke to him in their language, and Lila translated. They shared stories of their childhood, of adventures and lessons learned, and John listened with fascination. He realized that the sisters were not rivals, nor were they competing for his attention. Instead, they were teaching him about their world, their values, and their way of life. Slowly, he began to see the beauty in this connection, the depth and richness that he had never imagined. Yet John's heart was not without fear. He worried about his own limitations, about how he would navigate this unfamiliar culture. He worried about making mistakes, about offending someone unintentionally or failing to honor the trust placed in him. But at the same time, he felt a growing determination to try, to learn, and to respect the bonds he had been given. He realized that life in the village would not follow the simple path he had imagined, but it could be meaningful, rich, and full of love in ways he had never known. The days turned into weeks, and John's understanding deepened. He began to help with more responsibilities in the village, learning skills he had never imagined he could master. He learned to fish in the river, to gather wild berries without disturbing the plants, and to help care for the animals. The sisters taught him patiently, guiding him and correcting his mistakes gently. Each day, his respect and admiration for them grew, and he realized that love in this place was not limited to one person. It could be shared, nurtured, and respected across bonds of trust and care. By the end of the second part of his journey, John had accepted that life here was more complicated than he had first believed. He no longer thought of his connection to Lila alone. He recognized that he was now part of a larger, richer family, bound by customs and love that transcended his previous understanding. And although uncertainty still lingered in his heart, he felt a new sense of purpose. He would learn, adapt, and honor the connections he had been given. The journey he thought would be simple had turned into something extraordinary, a lesson in humility, respect, and the unexpected forms that love could take. Little did John know, the challenges and surprises were only beginning. The bonds he had begun to understand would soon be tested, and he would have to navigate emotions, traditions, and choices in ways that would change him forever. But for now, he embraced the present, walking alongside Lila, Yana, and Nijoni, feeling the strength of the family he had joined, and beginning to see the true meaning of connection and commitment. John had settled into the rhythm of village life, but he still carried a quiet tension in his heart. The realization that he was connected not only to Lila, but also to her sisters Yana and Nijoni, was becoming clearer each day. What had seemed like a simple arrangement at first now felt like a web of relationships he did not fully understand. He wanted to do right by everyone, but he worried constantly about making a mistake. One morning, John woke early and wandered toward the fields where Lila and her sisters were already at work. The sun was just rising, painting the sky with soft oranges and pinks. He watched as the sisters moved together, each in her own way, yet perfectly coordinated. Lila led with gentle confidence, Ayana moved with energy and boldness, and Nijoni moved quietly, her presence calm and steady. John felt a mix of awe and anxiety. How could he navigate such close and intricate bonds? As he approached, Lila waved and smiled. "Good morning," she said softly. "We have much to teach you today." John smiled back, but inside his worry churned. He knew he was learning more than just village skills. He was learning about relationships, trust, and cultural expectations. And yet, he had never experienced anything like this before. The day passed in a blur of activity. They harvested vegetables, prepared meals, and mended fences. John stumbled often, but the sisters helped him patiently. Sometimes Ayana laughed and teased him gently, making him feel embarrassed yet amused. Nijoni offered quiet encouragement, her words soft and kind. Lila guided him through the tasks, explaining not only how to do them, but why they mattered to the community. John began to see that everything in the village had a purpose, and every action was part of a larger story of care and tradition. Later in the afternoon, John finally had a quiet moment to himself. He sat near the river, staring at the rippling water, trying to sort through his thoughts. He realized that he could no longer think in simple terms. He had thought he had agreed to marry Lila alone, but now he understood that the sisters were all part of the bond he had entered. It was a truth he had not fully faced, and the weight of it pressed on him. That evening, after the villagers had gathered around the fire, John decided to speak honestly with Lila. He found her sitting alone on a small log, the firelight flickering across her face. He took a deep breath. "Lila," he began, I am trying to understand everything. I want to do the right thing, but I am afraid. I'm afraid I will make a mistake or hurt someone." Lila looked at him with a calm, steady gaze. "John," she said softly, "you have nothing to fear if your heart is honest. We know this is new for you. But to be part of our family, you must understand that love and respect are shared. There is no harm in connection if it is treated with care. Each of us, Yana, Nijoni, and I, will guide you. You will learn, and you will grow." Her words comforted John, but they also made him realize the challenge ahead. He was not merely learning tasks or customs. He was learning how to navigate human relationships in a completely unfamiliar way. That night, as he lay under the stars, he thought about the sisters individually. Lila's warmth and steadiness had drawn him in from the start. Iyana's energy and adventurous spirit fascinated him, and Nijoni's calm and gentle nature offered him a sense of peace. He realized that he cared for each in a different way, and each connection was meaningful. The next few days brought more lessons, both practical and emotional. John learned to weave baskets alongside the sisters, a task requiring patience, focus, and dexterity. He struggled at first, his fingers fumbling over the reeds, but the sisters encouraged him gently. Iyana laughed when he made mistakes, but she never mocked him harshly. Nijoni showed him how to correct his errors with calm guidance, and Lila offered advice and reassurance. Through these small, everyday moments, John began to understand the depth of the sisters' bond. It was not competitive. It was supportive and nurturing, a model of care that was entirely new to him. One afternoon, John decided to ask the sisters directly about their feelings toward him. They were sitting together under a large tree, resting after a morning of work. He cleared his throat nervously. "Iyana, Nijoni, I want to understand. I want to be honest with you and with myself. How do you see me? What does it mean that we are connected?" Iyana looked at him with a mischievous yet gentle smile. "We are part of the same family," she said. "It is not just about one person, it is about trust, care, and respect. You are learning our ways and you are learning us. That is what matters." Nijoni nodded silently, adding, "We do not compete. We share life and you are part of that. If your heart is honest, it will find its way." John listened, absorbing their words. He realized that he had been thinking in narrow terms, expecting a simple choice or a clear path. But here, the path was complex, layered, and full of meaning. The sisters were not rivals. They were guides, companions, and teachers. And he was beginning to understand that love could take many forms, forms he had never imagined before. That night, John could not sleep. He walked to the river, where the water reflected the moonlight like silver. He thought about his life before the village, the loneliness, the struggles, the simplicity of thinking he could control his own future. Here, he realized life was richer, more intricate, and full of surprises. The connections he had formed were not easy, but they were real. They required honesty, patience, and understanding, and he was willing to try, no matter how difficult it might be. The following day brought a test of his understanding. A small disagreement had arisen between the sisters while preparing food. Iyana wanted to add extra herbs to the stew, while Nijoni preferred it plain. John observed silently, unsure if he should intervene. He remembered Lila's words, honesty and respect would guide him. Carefully, he spoke to both sisters, suggesting a compromise, a small section with extra herbs and a main stew plain. Both sisters smiled, nodding in agreement. John felt a surge of pride. For the first time, he had navigated a situation without upsetting anyone, respecting their wishes while offering a solution. In the following weeks, John began to see the beauty of the sisters' relationship in a new light. They supported each other, challenged each other, and cared for each other in ways he had never witnessed before. Their bond was a lesson in harmony, teaching him that love did not have to be exclusive to one person to be meaningful. Each sister had a role in his life, and he had a role in theirs. The realization was both humbling and exhilarating. One evening, the village elders invited John to sit with them. They spoke of trust, responsibility, and the importance of respecting family bonds. John listened intently, understanding that his actions and words now carried weight. The elders' guidance reinforced the lessons he had learned from the sisters. Honesty, patience, and care were the foundations of meaningful connection. By the end of this part of his journey, John felt a profound change within himself. He no longer approached life with the narrow perspective he had brought from the East. He understood that relationships could be complex, that love could be shared, and that respect and honesty were far more important than simple desire. The sisters were no longer a source of confusion. They were teachers, guides, and companions, shaping him into a man capable of understanding and honoring their world. As John lay under the stars that night, listening to the soft whispers of the wind and the distant laughter of children, he felt a sense of calm determination. The path ahead would not be easy. There would be challenges, misunderstandings, and difficult choices. But he was no longer afraid. He had begun to understand the depth of the connections he had formed, and he was ready to face whatever came next with honesty, respect, and care. For John, this was the turning point. The moment when confusion gave way to understanding, when fear transformed into determination, and when he realized that life in the village was not just about survival. It was about love, trust, and the bonds that shape who we are. And with Lila, Ayana, and Nijoni by his side, he knew that his journey had only just begun. John had come a long way since arriving at the village. He had learned the rhythm of life, earned the trust of the villagers, and begun to understand the deep bonds between Lila and her sisters, Ayana and Nijoni. Yet, despite all his efforts, he knew that understanding was only the first step. Living fully within this web of relationships required action, honesty, and courage. It was a lesson he would soon learn in ways he had never imagined. One morning, the village awoke to a flurry of activity. A distant traveler had arrived, bringing news of traders passing through nearby lands. The village elders gathered to discuss how to host them and what gifts would be needed. John was asked to help prepare food and supplies. At first, the task seemed simple, but as he began, he realized the scale was far beyond anything he had encountered before. There were baskets to fill, dishes to cook, and arrangements to make, all while keeping pace with the sisters who moved swiftly and efficiently. Iana, ever energetic, zipped through the tasks with laughter and confidence. She encouraged John to keep up, teasing him gently when he struggled. Nijoni moved with calm precision, guiding him quietly and showing him how to prepare items without rushing. Lila stayed close, giving directions and helping John navigate the unfamiliar customs of hospitality. Together, they worked as a team, and John felt both pride and pressure. This was more than just work. It was a test of his commitment, patience, and understanding. As the day progressed, John began to notice subtle tensions in the group. Iana wanted to include extra spices and decorations for the visitors, while Nijoni preferred simplicity. Lila tried to mediate, but John could sense the underlying concern. Each sister wanted the best for him, for the village, and for the guests. He realized that the sisters' bond, though strong, sometimes included differing opinions, and he had to navigate these differences carefully. Drawing upon everything he had learned in the past weeks, John suggested a compromise. He proposed preparing the main dishes simply as Nijoni wished, while making small side dishes with the extra spices, satisfying Ayana's desire for flair. Both sisters looked at him, surprised, and then nodded with smiles. John felt a rush of relief. For the first time, he had managed a situation without upsetting anyone. He understood that respect and compromise were as important as honesty and care. After the preparations were complete, the village welcomed the travelers. John observed their reactions closely. The visitors were impressed by the organization, the warmth of the villagers, and the skill with which everything had been arranged. He noticed the pride in the sisters' eyes as they watched the guests enjoy the meal. Lila's smile was steady and proud, Ayana's laughter bright and joyful, and Nijoni's calm presence radiated satisfaction. John realized that the sisters were not just connected to him, they were connected to the life and well-being of the entire village. Later that evening, as the guests departed, John found himself alone with the sisters by the river. The moonlight reflected on the gentle ripples, and the air was filled with the soft sounds of night creatures. John took a deep breath. "I think I am beginning to understand," he said quietly. "But I also know that understanding is not enough. I need to live this truth, to act with care and honesty every day. I want to honor you, all of you, and the trust you have given me." Lila placed her hand gently on his shoulder. "John," she said softly, "you are learning what many never do. To live with understanding, to act with honesty, and to care for the bonds around you, that is the true test. And you are doing well. We see your heart." Yana laughed lightly, nudging him playfully. "You are learning fast, John, but the real challenge is to keep learning every day in everything you do. Life here is full of tests, not all of them easy, but you are beginning to pass." Nijoni nodded quietly. "We do not ask for perfection," she said. "We ask only for honesty, respect, and care. That is enough, and you are giving that even when it is difficult." John felt a warmth spread through him. He had begun to accept fully the depth of the relationships he had entered. He no longer saw the sisters as rivals or competitors. He saw them as part of a living, breathing bond that included him. It was a connection based on trust, care, and shared life, and he realized that this bond was more meaningful than anything he had experienced before. The following days brought more challenges. A sudden storm swept through the area, bringing heavy rain and strong winds. The river swelled, and the paths around the village became slippery and dangerous. John worked alongside the sisters to help secure the huts, guide the children, and protect the crops. It was exhausting work, both physically and mentally. At one point, a large branch threatened to fall on one of the huts, and John acted quickly, lifting it with all his strength while Ayana and Nijoni helped guide the children to safety. After the storm passed, the village gathered to assess the damage. Crops had been flattened, but no one was seriously hurt. The sisters praised John for his quick thinking and bravery. Lila smiled proudly, while Ayana laughed and teased him about his sudden strength. Nijoni offered quiet congratulations, her eyes soft and approving. John felt a deep sense of belonging. He was no longer an outsider. He was part of the village, part of the family, and his actions had mattered. One afternoon, the sisters invited John to join them on a walk through the hills. They wanted to teach him about the plants, animals, and history of the land. As they walked, they spoke not only about practical matters but also about life, tradition, and the values that guided the village. John listened intently, absorbing every word. The conversation turned to personal stories, memories of childhood, lessons learned, and dreams for the future. Each sister shared something unique, and John realized that through these stories, he was learning not only about them but about himself. Yana's story was full of adventure and courage. She spoke of climbing the tallest trees, exploring hidden valleys, and discovering the strength within herself. John felt inspired by her fearlessness and energy. Nijoni's story was quiet but profound. She spoke of patience, observation, and understanding the small details that others overlooked. John admired her wisdom and the calm clarity she brought to every situation. Lila's story was gentle yet powerful, speaking of love, loyalty, and the responsibility of caring for others. Through these stories, John began to see the sisters not only as individuals but as a unified force, each contributing to the harmony of the village. That evening, as the sun set behind the hills, John reflected on the lessons of the day. He realized that life in the village was a constant balance between challenge and support, between responsibility and care. The sisters were not merely companions. They were guides, teachers, and mirrors, showing him what it meant to live with honesty, courage, and respect. And in that moment, he understood that the bond he shared with them was more than a connection of hearts. It was a connection of life itself. As part 4 of his journey came to a close, John felt both exhausted and exhilarated. He had faced storms, both literal and emotional. He had navigated misunderstandings and disagreements. He had acted with courage, respect, and honesty, earning the trust and admiration of the sisters and the village. And yet, he knew that the ultimate test of his understanding and commitment was still to come. For now, he embraced the present. He walked with Lila, Gianna, and Nijoni under the starlit sky, feeling the warmth of their presence and the depth of the bond he had chosen to honor. He realized that life was not about simplicity or ease. It was about connection, responsibility, and the courage to act with care. And he knew, deep in his heart, that he was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. Time in the village passed in a rhythm both steady and alive. John had grown stronger, wiser, and more confident. He had come to understand the delicate bonds between Lila, Yana, and Nijoni, and he had begun to accept that life here would never be simple in the way he had once imagined. The challenges he had faced, the storm, disagreements, and the complexities of relationships, had taught him more about courage, patience, and love than anything he had ever learned in his previous life. One morning, John woke to the soft glow of sunlight spilling across the village. Birds sang in the trees, and the gentle murmur of the river filled the air. He stretched and prepared for the day, feeling a quiet excitement. Today, he had been asked to assist the elders in teaching the children about the traditions of the village. It was a task he accepted with pride, knowing it was both an honor and a responsibility. As he walked through the village, he saw Lila, Ayana, and Nijoni preparing for their own tasks. Each moved with purpose, and their presence reminded him of the lessons he had learned: patience, care, and respect. They nodded to him with gentle smiles, and he returned the gesture, feeling the deep bond that had grown between them over time. John realized that these small gestures of acknowledgement and connection were as important as any action or word. The morning was spent teaching the children about the plants, animals, and stories of the land. John showed them how to recognize edible herbs, how to move quietly through the fields, and how to respect the balance of nature. The children listened with rapt attention, and John felt a sense of fulfillment he had never experienced before. He glanced occasionally at the sisters, who watched him with pride and encouragement. Lila's smile was steady, Ayana's eyes sparkled with amusement, and Nijoni's calm presence was reassuring. In that moment, he realized how much he had grown, not just in skill, but in understanding, patience, and connection. After the morning lessons, the sisters invited John to walk with them along a narrow path that led to a small hill overlooking the village. The view was breathtaking: rolling fields, the winding river, and the cluster of huts nestled among the trees. John felt a deep sense of belonging as he walked alongside them, the wind carrying the scent of flowers and fresh earth. He realized that life here was full of beauty, not just in the landscape, but in the people, their relationships, and the care they showed for one another. As they sat on the hill, Lila spoke first. "John, you have learned much since you arrived. You have faced challenges, made choices, and shown care for all of us. But the greatest lesson is not in what you do, it is in who you have become. You have learned to see beyond your own desires and to honor the bonds around you." Gianna leaned back, her bright eyes fixed on him. "Life here is not easy," she said, "but it is full of meaning. You have proven that your heart is honest and your care is real. That is what matters most." Nijoni, quiet as always, spoke softly. "We do not ask for perfection, John. We ask only for presence, honesty, and respect. You have given that and more. The bond we share is strong because you honor it." John felt a warmth in his chest, a mix of gratitude, humility, and love. He had come to the village seeking peace and a fresh start, but he had found something far more profound. He had discovered the meaning of connection, trust, and shared responsibility. The sisters were no longer just individuals he admired. They were a part of his life, his family, and his understanding of what it meant to live fully. Over the following weeks, John continued to deepen his connections with the sisters. Each had a role in his life, and each taught him something unique. Lila guided him through the complexities of daily village life, showing him how to balance responsibility with care. Yana inspired him to embrace adventure and courage, to face challenges with energy and determination. Nijoni reminded him of the power of patience, observation, and quiet wisdom. Through their guidance, John had become not only a respected member of the village, but also a better man, capable of understanding and honoring bonds far more complex than he had ever known. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, John found himself reflecting on the journey he had taken. He thought of the long days of travel that had brought him here, the initial misunderstandings and fears, and the lessons he had learned along the way. He realized that life had given him a gift far greater than he had imagined: the chance to belong, to love, and to grow in ways that were both challenging and rewarding. The sisters joined him by the river, where the water shimmered in the soft light of dusk. They spoke quietly, sharing memories and hopes. Lila told stories of her childhood, of lessons learned from her parents and elders. Iana shared tales of adventure and curiosity, of times when she had faced fear and discovered strength within herself. Nijoni spoke of patience, observation, and the quiet joy of understanding the small wonders of life. John listened intently, feeling the richness of their experiences and the depth of the bond they shared. As night fell, the village gathered around the fire for a small celebration. Children danced and sang, elders told stories, and the sisters moved gracefully among the villagers, offering guidance and care. John watched, feeling a profound sense of peace. He understood now that life was not about simplicity or control. It was about connection, responsibility, and the courage to act with care and honesty. The bond he shared with Lila, Yana, and Nijoni was a reflection of that truth. Later, as the fire burned low and the villagers retired to their huts, John sat quietly with the sisters. He spoke softly, sharing his gratitude and reflections. "I came here seeking a simple life," he said, "but I have found something far richer. You have taught me the meaning of care, trust, and love. You have shown me how to live not just for myself, but for others, and how to honor the bonds that connect us." Lila smiled, her eyes warm and steady. "And you have learned well, John." You have faced challenges and fears, and you have grown. You are part of our family, not only in presence but in heart. That is what matters. Ayana laughed softly, nudging him playfully. You have done more than we expected. You have learned to act with courage, patience, and understanding. That is no small achievement. Nijoni reached out, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. We are proud of you, John. You have become someone who honors not only our traditions, but also the spirit of connection that binds us. That is the greatest gift you could give. In that moment, John felt a sense of completion, not an ending, but a beginning. He realized that life's true meaning lay not in possessions or plans, but in relationships, honesty, and care. He had faced challenges, navigated complex emotions, and learned the value of patience, courage, and empathy. And he had discovered that love could take many forms, all equally meaningful and beautiful. The nights that followed were peaceful. John walked with the sisters under the stars, helped with daily tasks, and continued to learn from the village elders. Each day brought small lessons and moments of joy, reinforcing the understanding that life was a shared journey, full of challenges, triumphs, and growth. The sisters were no longer just companions. They were teachers, guides, and mirrors of the life he now cherished. Over time, John came to understand that the bond he shared with Lila, Yana, and Nijoni was a reflection of the larger rhythm of the village. Each person had a role, each connection mattered, and each action carried weight. He realized that his journey had not been about choosing one path or one person, but about embracing the complexity of life with honesty, care, and respect. As the story drew to a close, John stood on a small hill overlooking the village. The river flowed gently, the huts glowed softly with firelight, and the voices of the villagers drifted on the evening breeze. He thought of the long journey that had brought him here, the challenges he had faced, and the lessons he had learned. And he knew with quiet certainty that he was home, not just in a place, but in a life filled with connection, love, and understanding. John smiled as he watched Lila, Ayana, and Nijoni moving together, their bond strong and unbroken. He realized that life had given him more than he had ever dreamed, the chance to belong, to learn, and to love in ways that transcended simple expectation. And he understood fully and completely that this was the life he had been seeking all along, a life rich with meaning, connection, and the enduring power of shared hearts.